Welcome back to another explainer. Today we are unpacking a totally fascinating, kinda mind-bending parallel from the August 14th, 2026 broadcast log of the aya.exe universe. We're going to look at a story that perfectly captures that amazing feeling of liberation during the Obon holiday when you finally manage to dodge heavy physical labor. And, get this, we're going to connect that exact feeling to how computer systems evolved from the shared chaos of DLL hell to modern isolated architectures. So, I have a question for you. What on earth connects a traditional summer holiday to catastrophic Windows system crashes? On the surface, a human complaining about doing household chores during the Japanese summer holiday of Obon seems to have absolutely nothing to do with the history of operating system architecture, right? But as we're about to see, the structural failures of both of these scenarios mirror each other perfectly. It's actually genius. Okay, part 1. The August 14th broadcast. So the narrative introduces us to our main character, X, and let's actually get one thing straight right out of the gate, because people sometimes get this wrong, and honestly, it completely misses the point. X is a woman. She's a female digital creator and artist. Her lived real-world experience as a woman dealing with the physical toll of managing a household is literally the core of this entire narrative. Anyway, her very human complaints are being actively monitored and echoed by these anthropomorphized system files on her computer. Specifically, we've got a frantic temporary file named old.tmp and a rather arrogant, historically traumatized system file named DLL. Now, you really have to notice how the low-level temporary file, old.tmp, just completely absorbs the human's real-world stress. While our female creator is muttering dark curses about how the Oba holiday should literally just disappear, old.tmp, which, has no physical body and has definitely never done a chore in its life, completely syncs up with her stress. It starts screaming for the holiday to vanish too. This ends up with the system administrators smilingly threatening to delete old.tmp for being useless, which sends the poor temp file into an absolute panic. It's a hilarious little interaction, but it sets the stage for a much deeper look at why EXE is so stressed out to begin with. Let's move on to the 5 labors of Obon. So, to figure out what's causing our creators so much physical and mental fatigue, the system character, Deal, brilliantly decodes her stress using a numbers 4 lottery logic. It directly maps the numbers 7, 5, 2, and 8 to the utterly exhausting physical realities of hosting family. The 7 stands for the 7 days of prep work she spent washing sheets and running dehumidifiers. The 2 represents the sheer physical agony of hauling heavy guest futons up and down 2 flights of stairs. The 8 is simply the sweltering heat of August. But the 5? That is the most important one. It represents her newfound liberation from the 5 major heavy labors of hosting. Why? Because for the very first time, her sisters are just visiting. They aren't staying overnight. And that brings us to the crucial point here, the actual root cause of all this burden. The stress didn't come from her family themselves. It came from the physical act of sharing resources. Having to maintain a shared guest room or share futons causes this immense, universal, administrative, and physical burden for the host. Our creator X is celebrating her liberation strictly because that shared physical space is no longer required. Which perfectly transitions us into our next section, the DLL hell era. Now, for those of you who might not know, DLL was basically the dark ages of the 1990s Windows era. And as DLL explains to the panicking temp file, this digital phenomenon mirrors the exact chaos of a crowded, overshared family home. When multiple applications are forced to share the exact same library file, any tiny change made by one application can completely destroy the functionality of another. I absolutely love how dramatic Dell gets here when recounting the trauma of the Windows 3.1 and 95 days. It describes how application installers ruthlessly fought over the shared System.32 directory. I mean, imagine inviting a guest into your home and they just decide to replace your entire kitchen with an older, broken kitchen just because they prefer it. That is literally what applications were doing to the operating system's shared folders back then. You see, because computer memory and disk space were incredibly expensive and scarce back in the 90s, sharing code was considered the ultimate justice. It was an absolute necessity, but man, it created a fragile house of cards. Bad uninstallers would just blindly delete shared files that other apps still needed, and the registry only allowed one version of a file to be registered at a time. It was a complete administrative nightmare built entirely on the forced sharing of limited real estate. And this brilliantly illustrates the central metaphor of this entire broadcast log. A shared guest room in the real world is exactly like the System.32 folder in a computer. Conflicting relatives competing for limited space and resources behave exactly like conflicting application installers fighting over shared code. Forced sharing, whether it's physical futons or digital files, inevitably leads to systemic collapse. Fortunately, there is a fix. Section 4. Isolation brings liberation. The chaos of the 90s obviously couldn't last forever. As we move through time, specifically with the introduction of Windows XP in 2001, Microsoft finally established a strong defense line against this chaos, and it's a defense that remains the standard all the way into the log's present day of 2026. The solution was side-by-side or WinSS. Basically, by strictly defining application requirements in manifest files and physically isolating different versions of the same DLL into their own separate dedicated folders, Windows finally broke the curse of the shared registry. Applications were no longer forced to share a single room. They were given their own isolated spaces, which stopped the overwriting terror dead in its tracks. Now, think about what a massive philosophical shift in technology this is. In the 16-bit era, saving storage by forcing everyone to share was the highest virtue. But in our modern terabyte era, storage is dirt cheap. The new logic is that wasting disk space to heavily isolate files is vastly superior to experiencing system downtime. You happily trade some cheap storage space for absolute peace and stability. And this brings us right to the profound parallel at the heart of the log. Our human creator, exe, is finally free from hauling futons because our family is now isolated in their own respective homes at night. They aren't sharing the guest room anymore, just as the operating system is free from constant crashes because application files are now safely isolated in WinSS. For both the woman and the machine, isolation brought total liberation. But wait, there's a catch. Let's look at modern dependency ghosts. As the character DLL warns the younger files, the story of system architecture doesn't just end with a perfect happily ever after. Even though the operating system itself is largely safe from DLL hell today thanks to isolation, that underlying human habit of relying on external structures, it continues to haunt us. The problem didn't vanish. It literally just moved up the chain to a completely different layer of our digital lives. Today, this ghost manifests in modern web and software development. Anyone who has messed around with Node.js knows this pain. We see it with massive, bloated dependency chains where one missing package breaks half the internet. We see it with conflicting Python environments that drive developers absolutely crazy. As Dillevelle rightfully points out, as long as humans write code and insist on sharing libraries to save a little time, we are still trapped in the dependency hell cycle. The venue just changed. So it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought to chew on, both for the software we use and our own personal lives. In our endless quest to optimize resources by sharing, are we all just endlessly rebuilding that exact same stressful guest room in different forms? Is trading efficiency for total isolation the only way we can ever truly find peace? Next time you have to haul a heavy futon out of a closet or debug a totally broken code library, remember the hard-earned wisdom of Dell. Sometimes, just letting everyone have their own separate space is the greatest system upgrade of all. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.